I'm not a monster, okay? I know a lot of people in the comments are going to say I am. I can already see it. You deserved it. He did the right thing. How could you say that about your own child? I've read enough internet to know how this goes, but I need you to understand something before you judge me. I didn't wake up one day and decide, hey, let me destroy my marriage and my family with one sentence. I didn't plan any of this. It wasn't some evil scheme. It wasn't a secret fantasy I'd been hiding for years. It was one stupid, careless moment. One sentence I thought was just dark humor. One slip where my insecurity spoke louder than my love. And my husband took that sentence, looked at it and said, okay, then I'm done. So, yeah, I'm the woman who told her husband she wished their baby looked like her ex. And yes, he packed my bags and threw me out. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Okay. Let me tell you how one sentence took me from happy wife and new mom to sitting on the curb outside my own house with a suitcase, watching the father of my child close the door in my face. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. It starts on that curb. It always does in my head. It was cold the night he kicked me out. Not the dramatic movie kind of storm. No thunder or lightning. Just this damp chill that settles in your bones and makes everything feel heavier than it is. The streetlights along our little cul-de-sac glowed a tired yellow, buzzing faintly. The pavement was still wet from a drizzle earlier. Little puddles in the cracks, reflecting light in broken shapes. I was sitting on the curb in front of our house, the house we had picked together, the house where I'd unpacked baby clothes and argued about paint colors and cried in the kitchen over nothing and everything. Now I was outside of it, like a stranger, with a suitcase at my side. The suitcase was overstuffed. He'd packed it himself, which is why nothing really fit right. One corner of the zipper wouldn't close, and through that gap, a tiny stuffed giraffe toy was poking out. My son's giraffe. The one my husband had bought on a random Tuesday, because it looked like it needed a home, he'd said, holding it up and grinning. Seeing that little giraffe hanging halfway out of a suitcase on the curb, that's the part that made my chest hurt. The front door was still open behind me at first, light spilling onto the front step, across the welcome mat we'd picked together at some cheap home store. I could hear faint sounds from inside, the low hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor as he moved, our baby making a soft, sleepy sound from down the hall. Then his footsteps came closer. I didn't turn around right away. I just sat there, fingers digging into the plastic handle of the suitcase, staring at a dark, wet spot on the asphalt, like if I focused hard enough, I could rewind time. His shadow stretched long on the ground before me, distorted by the angle of the light, shoes on the threshold. I finally forced myself to look up. He was standing in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other resting on the doorknob. Inside, the hallway lights made a halo behind him. To anyone else, he probably just looked tired, calm, maybe a little pale. To me, he looked final. No yelling, no rage, no dramatic, how could you? Just this quiet devastation in his eyes that I'd never seen before. It scared me more than any shouting ever could have. "Mark," I said, my voice already breaking. "Please, you're overreacting. It was just..." He cut me off without raising his voice. "If you want a child that looks like your ex," he said, each word slow and precise, "go find him." It was so calm, so soft, like he had drained all the anger out of it and left only the truth. I opened my mouth again. All my usual lines crowded my tongue at once. I was joking. I didn't mean it. I'm tired. I'm hormonal. You know I love you. We have a baby. You can't do this. None of them made it out. He looked at me for one more long second, like he was taking a final screenshot of this version of me to store away with the others. Then he stepped back, pulled the door slowly toward himself, and the light disappeared as it closed with a soft click. That was it. The sound of a marriage ending, apparently, isn't always a slam. Sometimes it's a quiet click. I sat there, staring at the closed door, the welcome mat, the tiny giraffe hanging out of the suitcase. People talk about their world collapsing, and I used to roll my eyes at that phrase. But there's no better way to describe it. It really did feel like the edges of my life curled inward. If you had paused the scene right there and walked up to me and said, "Okay, Clara, explain how you got here. Explain why your husband just told you to go find your ex. Explain why your stuff is in that suitcase," I probably would have stammered out some version of, "I'm not a bad person, I just said something stupid." I still start the story that way in my head. So let me rewind, because if you're going to hate me, you might as well hate me for the right reasons. I'm 29, new mom, was married to a good man, not a perfect man, not a movie star, not some billionaire, just a genuinely good man. We'll call him Mark. We met in a way that was embarrassingly normal. No crazy meet cute, no drunk milestone, no car crash, just two people trying to eat lunch in the same crowded office cafeteria. I was 24, working as an assistant in a marketing firm, running on coffee and imposter syndrome. He was 27, working in IT for another company in the same building. I noticed him before he noticed me, but not in a lightning strike way. He was just there, always holding doors for people, always carrying too many things, always saying no worries when someone crashed into him. The first actual conversation we had was because I dropped my salad. Not just dropped, launched. The stupid plastic lid on the container wasn't on properly, and when I picked it up, the bottom slipped. Lettuce, cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, dressing, croutons, everywhere. All over the cafeteria floor in front of at least 50 people. I froze. Someone snickered. Someone said, "Ouch." And then there he was, kneeling next to me with a handful of napkins from his tray, saying, "At least it wasn't soup. Soup is a whole different level of tragedy." I laughed. It burst out of me, too loud, probably, and I remember thinking, who makes jokes when someone else is covered in lettuce? We cleaned it up together. He gave me half his sandwich. We sat there, two strangers sharing a barely edible turkey sandwich and talking about nothing. And I remember walking back to my desk after and thinking, he's nice. Not hot, not mind-blowing, not I'm going to marry him, just nice. You have to understand something about me back then. I was used to chaos. I'd come out of a long, messy relationship a year before. We'll call him Liam, the shadow man in this story, the ghost. Liam was the opposite of nice in every way that counts in the long term, and yet for 3 years, I thought he was the love of my life. He was beautiful, stupidly beautiful. Tall, lean, with this lazy smile that made you forget your own name. He played guitar for fun, which of course meant he carried it to every party. He was the kind of guy who could turn a stupid joke into a group laugh. He was magnetic. He was also unreliable, selfish, and allergic to responsibility. He missed birthdays. He forgot important dates. He stayed out all night and didn't answer his phone. If I cried, he would sometimes hold me, and sometimes roll his eyes and say I was too much. He cheated on me. Not with a full-blown affair, as far as I know, but with enough blurred lines and late-night texting and, "It was nothing, she's just a friend," that my brain never fully rested. I never knew where I stood with him. We broke up for good when I was 22, after one too many lies blew up. It was ugly. There were tears and shouting and dramatic lines like, "You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do," and "You'll never see me again." And I believe both. Except life has a sense of humor. I did see him again, constantly, on social media, in my memories, in the stories I told my friends. You know those people who talk about their exes like characters in a book they once read? That was me. I would say things like, Liam was such a mess, but God, those were some wild years, or he broke me in ways I didn't know I could break, but I'm stronger now, or he was toxic, but I can't lie, he was the most beautiful guy I've ever been with. I thought it was harmless, just reminiscing, just repackaging trauma into something interesting. When Mark came into my life, he was like a palate cleanser. He texted when he said he would. He showed up when he said he'd be there. He remembered small things. My favorite takeout, the fact that strong perfumes gave me headaches, that I hated being called Claire instead of Clara. He took me on actual dates, not just hang out at my place and watch something. He met my parents. He asked how my day went and listened to the answer. He wasn't exciting in that adrenaline-spiking way. Loving him felt more like moving into a house that finally had solid walls after living in a tent during storm season. So when he proposed at 26, it felt like the right thing to do. Not a fairy tale. Something better. A future. We got married in a small ceremony. Backyard, fairy lights, a borrowed arch. My dress wasn't custom anything. Mark's suit wasn't tailored by a fancy brand. But when I looked at him during our vows, I thought, this is my safe place. And I really did love him. I want you to believe that, because it makes what I did so much worse. I carried Liam into our marriage like a ghost in a corner, not actively, not deliberately. I wasn't texting him behind Mark's back. I wasn't stalking him daily. I wasn't fantasizing about running away with him. But when my friends and I talked about crazy exes or that one guy you'll always remember, his name was always the one I reached for. I painted him as this tragic, romantic, wrong person, wrong time story. The one that got away, I'd say, half smiling, like it meant nothing. Mark heard more of those conversations than I realized. He never forbade me from saying his name. He never said, don't talk about him. But once, early in our marriage, he did say, very quietly, it's weird hearing so many stories about someone you used to love so much. I'd shrugged it off. You're the one I married, I'd told him, kissing his cheek. That should tell you everything. I thought that solved it, that my ring and our shared calendar and our joint Netflix account were proof enough that Liam was just a story. Then I got pregnant. Pregnancy is weird. Nobody can fully prepare you for how much it hijacks not just your body, but your brain. You are suddenly responsible for a tiny, invisible person, and every app, every website, every video tells you all the ways you can screw that up. Mark became even more Mark. He was there for everything, every ultrasound he could attend, every appointment. He came home from work with prenatal vitamins and weird craving snacks because he'd read some article about iron levels. He bought 3 different books on being a good dad and highlighted things. He painted the nursery himself, even though he hates painting. He bought a rocking chair and assembled it at midnight because the baby might come early, you never know. He talked to my stomach. He adored me when I didn't even like myself. Meanwhile, I did what a lot of dumb pregnant women do. I spent too much time on Instagram. Perfect mothers with perfect hair and perfect skin posting perfect newborns in perfect onesies in perfect nurseries. Their captions killed me. He looks just like his daddy. Mini version of his father. He has his father's eyes. I'm in love. I started imagining our baby. Mark has brown hair, brown eyes, gentle features. He's not striking, but there's a warmth to him, a kindness. People trust him immediately. Liam had that movie star symmetry, sharp jaw, light eyes, that goddamn crooked, charming smile. In my worst, most insecure moments, I'd look in the mirror, puffy, swollen, with stretch marks mapping my stomach, and think, please let our kid be cuter than me. I didn't say it out loud, but that thought was there. Our son was born in a blur of pain, terror, and wonder. There's an entire video's worth of story just in that day. But I'll skip to what matters now. He came out healthy. That was the important part. That's what I should have focused on. He was small, red, wrinkled, a perfect little alien. His face was scrunched, his eyes were dark and cloudy, and he had this weird little frown, like he was already unimpressed with the world. Mark cried when the nurse put him in his arms. Full-on cried, ugly cried. He looked at that strange little newborn and saw the most beautiful thing in the universe. "He's perfect," he kept saying. "He's perfect. He has your mouth. Look at that tiny mouth. It's yours." I smiled, but there was this tiny voice in my head that went, "You can't even tell yet. Everyone lies about newborns. They all look the same." In those first weeks, we were both exhausted. We took turns staying up, changing diapers, trying to figure out breastfeeding, bottle feeding, whatever feeding. Mark did everything. Laundry, dishes, runs to the store. He learned how to swaddle from YouTube tutorials at 3 a.m. And every time he held our son, he'd say some variation of, "Look at him. He has your nose. He has your smile. He has my ears. He's us." And every time, that voice in my head muttered, "I don't see it. He just looks weird." I wanted one of those pretty babies. That's where it began. Not with Liam, with my own insecurity. Then my brain did what brains do when they're used to comparing. It reached for the easiest reference point, the prettiest man I'd ever dated, the one I'd spent years romanticizing, Liam. It started small, a passing thought. If he had Liam's eyes, he'd look like a model baby, a late-night fantasy. Imagine if people gasped and said, "Oh my God, he's so gorgeous," instead of, "What a little grump." A tiny stab of envy when someone commented under another woman's picture, "He's like a little clone of his hot dad." I know how awful that sounds. Believe me, I didn't say any of it out loud. Until I did. Here's the scene. The moment I detonated my own life, it was a Thursday evening. The baby was maybe 2.5 months old. He was in that phase where he alternated between sleeping like a dream and screaming like the world was ending. That day had been rough. He'd spat up on me 3 times. I'd barely managed to shower. My hair was in a bun that felt like a punishment. The house smelled faintly of sour milk. There were dishes in the sink, laundry on the couch, crumbs on the coffee table. I felt like a failure. Mark had just gotten home from work. He'd taken the baby as soon as he walked through the door, kissed my forehead, said, "Go sit down, I'll handle him." Now he was on the couch, holding our son in that practiced way, bouncing him slightly, making faces. I was sitting in the armchair opposite, half watching them, half scrolling on my phone. Some influencer mom was posting then versus now pictures, and her now was her, 6 weeks postpartum with abs. I looked at her, then at myself, then at my baby. Mark pressed his nose lightly to our son's cheek and smiled. "Look at that," he said, glancing at me. "He's got your little smile." Or he will, once he figures out how to smile without looking like he's plotting revenge. I forced a laugh. My brain, though, was mean. "Your little smile. Great, so he's going to look like your bloated, tired face." The thought didn't just stay in my head this time. It found my mouth. I rolled my eyes and snorted. "Lucky him," I said, in this sharp, sarcastic tone that wasn't even funny. Honestly, I was kind of hoping he'd come out looking more like Liam. At least then he'd be cute. The moment the words left my lips, my stomach dropped. They sounded different out loud, meaner, more real. I looked up to see Mark's reaction, already preparing to say, "I'm kidding, relax." The reaction never came. He froze. His hands, which had been gently bouncing the baby, went still. His smile vanished. Not slowly. Just gone. He didn't look at me right away. He looked down at our son, his jaw clenched, his throat worked. When he finally met my eyes, there was something in his face that I'd never seen there before. Not anger, not even sadness. Just something closing. I forced a laugh. "Oh my God, Mark, I said, waving my hand. I'm joking. Relax. Obviously, I don't want our kid to look like my ex. I was just... He stood up, carefully. He adjusted the baby in his arms, checked his little head, made sure he was secure. His movements were gentle, automatic, like muscle memory taking over. Then he walked past me. No words, no eye roll. No, that wasn't funny. No, I know you're joking, but that stung. Just silence. He took our son to the nursery. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the spot where he'd just stood, replaying my own voice in my head. Honestly, I was kind of hoping he'd come out looking more like Liam. At least then he'd be cute. I waited for him to come back and tell me off, to start a fight, to throw the ex's name in my face, to demand I explain myself. He didn't. He came back to the living room, sat on the other end of the couch and turned on the TV. Some random show. I tried to talk to him. So, how was work? I asked, voice too bright. Fine, he said, eyes on the screen. Did you eat? I tried. Yeah. Do you want me to grab you something? I can heat up the leftovers. It's okay. One word answers. No warmth, no teasing. I told myself it was just shock, that he'd need a minute, that in a day or two we'd laugh about it. We didn't. Over the next week, the shift became impossible to ignore. He still did all the things he was supposed to do as a husband and father. He changed diapers, he took night shifts, he went to work, came home, took the baby so I could shower, fix things around the house. But the little extras disappeared. No more, you look cute today, when I walked into the room in a new shirt. No more random hugs from behind while I washed dishes. No more kissing the top of my head for no reason. His affection had been this quiet background hum in our life. I only noticed how loud it had been when it stopped. At first, I convinced myself he was just tired. Work was stressful. The baby was a lot. Maybe he was depressed. Maybe it had nothing to do with what I said. Then I went to brunch with my friends. We sat at a table outside, under one of those big umbrellas, the kind cafes use to trick you into thinking you're in Paris. 2 of them had their babies with them, these chubby little things that made weird gargling noises. Mine was at home with Mark. You look wiped, my friend Jenna said, sipping her iced coffee. That's what happens when your son thinks 3 a.m. is party time, I replied, trying to sound light. How's Mark? Another friend, Leela, asked. He was like, annoyingly perfect as a husband before. Is he still winning? I hesitated. He's been... weird, I said. Quieter. He barely touches me. He talks to me like a roommate. Did something happen? Jenna asked, immediately suspicious. I stabbed my fork into my salad. We had a stupid argument, I said. He's being dramatic about it. What did you say? Lila pressed. I shrugged. I could have lied. I could have softened it. But I'd never really rehearsed a gentler version in my head, and the raw one slipped out. I made a joke about the baby, I said. He freaked out. What kind of joke? Jenna asked. I poked at a tomato. I just said, I started slowly, that the baby doesn't really look like either of us yet, you know? That he kind of looks like my ex, as in like, I wished he was a bit more like him, as in, you know, objectively my ex was hot. It was a joke. Mark took it personally. The silence at the table was brutal. You told your husband, Lila said carefully, that you wished your baby looked like your ex. Not like that, I said quickly. Not like, actually. I just said at least then he'd be cute. I was being self-deprecating, like, haha, our kid got my average face, too bad. Jenna put her fork down. Clara, she said, I love you, but that's a lot. It was a joke, I repeated, hearing how defensive I sounded and hating it. If my partner looked at our kid and said they wished he looked like someone else they used to be in love with, Lila said, I don't think I'd ever get over it. The words, used to be in love with, stung more than I expected. I don't love Liam, I snapped. Not anymore. I haven't in years. Maybe not, Jenna said gently. But Mark doesn't live in your head. He hears what you say, and what you said is harsh, especially with all the postpartum stuff. He probably already feels like he's in second place to the baby. Now he has to wonder if he's in second place to your ex too. I rolled my eyes. You're all being dramatic, I said, but a little less confidently. They dropped it eventually. We moved on to talking about daycare wait lists and that one mom who lied about her kid's age to skip the queue. But their faces stayed with me. Back home, nothing got better. If anything, it got worse. We still functioned. The house didn't fall apart. The baby still got fed and changed and rocked. But the connection between Mark and me felt like a rope that had started to fray. And instead of carefully tying it back together, I kept tugging. One night, about 2 weeks after the joke, I finally cracked. We were in bed. The baby was sleeping in his crib in our room. The monitor was glowing softly. Mark was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling. I was lying on my side, facing him. "Can we talk?" I whispered. He didn't look at me right away. "About what?" he asked. "About whatever's going on with you," I said. "You've been acting different." Now he did look at me. His eyes were tired. "I'm acting different," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. "Yes," I said. "You're distant, cold. You barely even look at me. It's like you're punishing me." "I'm not punishing you," he replied. "Then what is this?" I pushed. "Ever since I made that stupid joke, you've been off." His jaw tightened. "You mean," he said quietly, "ever since you said you wished our son looked like your ex?" There it was, out in the air again, ugly and heavy. "I told you I didn't mean it," I said. "I was tired. I was insecure. You said," he continued, not letting me hide. "At least then he'd be cute." I swallowed. "So you're going to hold one sentence over my head forever?" I snapped. "People make mistakes." "It wasn't just a sentence," he said. "It was a window." "A window to what?" I demanded. He stared at the ceiling again. "To what's going on in your head," he said. "To what you really think. To the reality that when you look at our son, you don't see us. You see him." "That's not true," I said quickly. Too quickly. "It took a lot for me to get over the idea of you being in love with that guy," Mark went on, as if I hadn't spoken. "You've told so many stories about him, about how intense it was, how much it hurt, how he broke your heart. I told myself that was just part of your past, that everyone has one intense first love." "You are my husband," I said. "You're the one I chose." "And I believed that," he said, "even when you dropped his name in stories, even when you described him like some tragic movie character, I told myself, she's with me. That's what matters." "It is what matters," I insisted. "Then why is he in our child?" Mark asked, turning back to me. "Why is he in jokes in our living room? Why is he the standard of cute in your mind?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "I was joking," I said again, weaker this time. "You're blowing this out of proportion." He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Out of proportion," he repeated. "You know what I hear every time I look at our son now? I hear your voice saying he'd be cuter if he looked like another man." The words hit like a slap. We slept facing opposite directions that night. 10 days later, he told me he'd seen a lawyer. It was after dinner. The baby monitor was on the counter. The dishwasher was humming. I was wiping down the high chair. Mark was leaning against the sink, arms crossed. "I talked to a lawyer last week," he said suddenly. I turned. "A lawyer?" I repeated, my heart skipping. "Why?" "To understand my options," he said. "If we separate." For a second, I genuinely thought he was joking. It sounded too dramatic even for him. Then I saw his face. He wasn't joking. "You're not serious," I said. "We just had a baby." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I went to a lawyer and not a bar. That's why I wanted clear information before we did anything stupid." "So you've already decided," I said, the panic rising. "You've already decided to leave me." "I've decided," he said slowly, that I don't want to raise my son with someone who openly wishes he looked like another man, especially someone who refuses to understand why that's a problem. I do understand, I lied. It was wrong. I get it. I told you I'm sorry. You told me you were joking, he replied. You told me I was overreacting. You told your friends I was being dramatic. You haven't once looked me in the eye and said, what I said was cruel and I'm ashamed of it. I stared at him. The urge to defend myself was still there, to list reasons, to shift blame to hormones, to postpartum depression, to social media, to anything but me. Instead, I said the worst possible thing. You're being dramatic, I muttered. I watched it happen. Something in his expression shut off. He'd been hurt, angry, tired, but there had still been some flicker of hope in his eyes, like he was waiting for me to say the right thing, to finally get it. When I called him dramatic, that flicker went out. He took a breath, nodded once, and said, "Okay, that's all I needed." He walked past me into the bedroom. I followed a minute later, heart racing. He had the suitcase out on the bed. He wasn't throwing clothes in like a movie. He was folding them, neatly. My shirts, my leggings, my underwear, my jackets. All the pieces of my daily life with him, going into a suitcase like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. "Stop," I said, grabbing a pair of jeans from his hands. "What are you doing?" He looked at me with this terrible calm. "Packing your things," he said, "so you can go." "You can't be serious," I said. "Mark, come on, we're not, this is insane." "What would be insane," he said, gently taking the jeans back and folding them, "is staying in a situation where every time you look at our son, I wonder who you see." Tears blurred my vision. "I see him," I insisted, "our son. I see you. I see us." "And you also see the ghost of someone who hurt you," he replied. "And you decided to introduce that ghost into our living room as a joke, into our child's face. That is a level of disrespect I can't live with." I grabbed his arm. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. "I have nowhere to go." "You have parents," he said. "Friends, people who will help you." "They'll ask what happened," I said. "What am I supposed to tell them? That my husband threw me out because I made a joke?" "Tell them the joke," he said. "Word for word. See what they say." He zipped the suitcase. "Mark," I sobbed, "please. I'll delete every picture. I'll never say his name again. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't do this. Don't break our family over one mistake." He picked up the suitcase and rolled it toward the front door. "This isn't about punishing you," he said. "It's about protecting him. I might not be able to stop you from being his mother. I won't try, but I can control who lives in this house with him, and I won't let him grow up as some twisted symbol of who you think you missed out on." I followed him, still pleading, still bargaining. At the door, he set the suitcase down. The zipper tugged a little, and the stuffed giraffe popped out. That's when I completely broke. "You're abandoning me," I said. "You're abandoning your wife." He looked at me with eyes that were shining now, finally, but his voice stayed steady. "You abandoned us first," he said. "The minute you wished another man's face onto our child, you left. I'm just catching up." Then he opened the door and rolled the suitcase out. I backed out with it. I don't even remember how I ended up on the curb. I just know I ended up there, hands on the suitcase handle, tears streaming down my face, while he stood in the doorway, our baby sleeping down the hall. "If you want a life that looks like your ex," he said, "go find it, but not in my home, not around my child." The door closed. And that's how I got here. I went to my parents' house that night. I told them some edited version first. Then, when my mum pressed, I told her the real sentence. She looked at me the way the bridal suite looked at that woman in that other story, a mix of horror and disbelief. "Clara," she said, voice shaky, "why would you say something like that?" "I don't know," I said, crying. "I was stupid. I was tired. I thought it was funny." "It wasn't funny," she said. "It was cruel." Over the next few days, I watched the fallout spread quietly. Friends who had once told me, "You're such a strong woman," now sent cautious texts. "I heard what happened. Are you okay? But also, why did you say that?" My best friend, who usually defends me no matter what, said, "I'm on your side as a person, but not on your side in this." Nobody said, "He overreacted." They all said, "What did you expect?" And Mark, he did what he said he'd do. He didn't try to cut me out of our son's life entirely. We started talking about scheduled visits, about mediation, about shared custody. He was calm in those conversations, respectful, businesslike. He sent pictures of our son, videos, little updates. In almost every one, he looked genuinely happy, holding our son in the park, smiling, feeding him in the high chair, laughing when he poured applesauce all over himself, carrying him on his shoulders, pointing at something in the distance. He looked lighter. You want to know the worst part? I don't miss Liam, not even a little. I don't lie awake at night dreaming about my ex. I don't want him back. I don't want his face, his chaos, his guitar, his stupid late-night texts. I miss Mark. I miss the man who painted a nursery and read dad blogs and made me grilled cheese sandwiches when I cried for no reason. I miss the man who called my swollen, exhausted, puffy pregnant face beautiful. I miss the man who held our son and saw him as perfect without needing him to look like anyone else. I miss the life I had with a good man who loved me enough to be gutted by one sentence. So yeah, I'm the villain in this story. You can call me that in the comments. You wouldn't be entirely wrong. I was careless with my words. I treated my husband's insecurity like a joke. I treated my own pain like content. I carried a ghost from my past into the one place it had no right to be, my child. I told my husband I wished our baby looked like my ex. He believed me. And for the first time in our relationship, he loved himself enough to say, "Then go. You won't use me and my son as consolation prizes." If there's anything you take from this, let it be this. You don't get to tell someone how much your jokes should hurt them. You don't get to decide that your trauma gives you a free pass to stab your partner with it. You don't get to keep a shrine to your ex in your mind and then act surprised when your current partner finally sees it. I justified myself with every excuse in the book: stress, postpartum, insecurity, hormones, social media pressure. None of them erased what I said. None of them put the words back in my mouth. None of them reopened that door once it clicked shut. So, yeah, I'm not a monster. I'm just a woman who learned the hard way that one sentence can be enough to show someone exactly where they stand in your heart. And sometimes, once they see that, they won't stay.